Thank you so much. I'm Paige. I'm an alcoholic. And yeah, let us dive into the book. So where we're picking up is on page 28. And we only got a couple paragraphs before we finish. There is a solution. So fingers crossed, knock on wood. Let's see if we can do it this week, because I was sure we'd be able to do it last week. And as some of you will know, that a theme in my life, I was wrong. So let's dive in. So what we're picking up is the very, very bottom paragraph of page 28 in the following chapter. So it says, in the following chapter, there appears an explanation of alcoholism as we understand it. So hopefully what we're going to do today is get into the chapter more about alcoholism. And more about alcoholism is going to dive into the nature of what it means to be an alcoholic, and dive into the understanding of what step one really is saying. Which, by the way, spoilers, not good news over there. Step one, not a good place to be. So let's not stay there, but let's get an understanding of it. So, and it says, then a chapter addressed to the agnostic. Now that chapter, we agnostics, is going to be where we dive in and get our directions and explanation for step two. So we're not gonna get there for a while based on how quickly we go, but we will get to the second step. And when we talk about that word agnostic, we're gonna really break that down when we get to the chapter We Agnostics, and we're gonna talk about its etymological origins. Well, I might do that today because I'm off on that tangent. Oh no, a cheeky tangent. What are we going to do? Focus, Paige. Alrighty. But when we talk about the word agnostic in modern connotations, that typically means somebody that's maybe a bit of a fence sitter. You know, maybe there is a power, maybe there isn't. I don't know. Like, that's kind of sort of the modern language or the modern meaning, how the word agnostic is used today. Now, the origin of the word agnostic is Greek in origin, and egg in ancient Greece was without, and gnosis meant knowledge. But I'll be honest, and we're going to really get into this, it didn't mean that head knowledge. It didn't mean I could recite things from an encyclopedia. Now, some of you are going to be not surprised at all that growing up, I was absolutely an encyclopedia kid. Oh, I was having a good time with that. Not surprised at all. But it is not about what I know and hear. And the gnosis, the knowing that is referenced, is not, I'm good at a spelling bee because I can recite information. It is that heart level experiential knowing. And so, each and every one of us, we might have belief, we might have faith, we might have none, we might have prejudice, we might have religious trauma, but each and every one of us, when we come to the second step, we all experience that etymological or original definition of agnosticism. We have all not had that experiential knowing of this power. And so that's the purpose of these steps, to get us from this place that we're going to talk about in step one to that place of experience that happens in step 12. So it says, many who were once among this class, which is to say agnostic, are now among our members. So guess what? And actually I was going to say, guess what? And if I just be quiet and I read the next sentence, it'll tell me. It says, surprisingly enough, we find such convictions no great obstacle to a spiritual experience. And what's important about that? The word conviction means belief or value or idea. And what that means is what I believe is not an obstacle to a spiritual experience. That's good news, because I often think I've got to get that whole G-O-D thing sorted out before I can work the steps. You know, I think I got to get spiritual before I take the actions of the steps. And guess what? What I believe cannot hold me back if I'm willing to take actions that I don't like, don't believe in, and I don't think is going to help somebody like me. And that's great news. So if I'm here today and I'm like, I don't like God, Paige, when you use that word, and please know that I'm using it in large part because if I say higher power or spirit of the universe, I'm going to cut into what little time I leave Peppa at the end. And goodness gracious, poor Peppa needs as much time as, actually she does really well with me, but it's rude of me. God is efficient, but if you hear me use the word God and you bristle to be filled with, ew, gross, I don't like it, or you're here and you're like spiritual, no thank you, or you hear me talking about God and you come to mind of like Sunday school memories and you're like, no thank you. What I want you to know is that is okay. Also, if you're here today and you hear me talk about God and you're really frustrated and confused and it's like, I don't know how to get God, that is okay. The purpose of the 12 steps will bring about that spiritual awakening. I take the actions to bring about the experience. I don't have to figure out God to take the steps. I don't want to say I take the steps to figure out God because that's not quite what it is, but I take the steps to experience this power, which is wonderful because what I believe cannot hold me back. It is what I do that matters. So it says further on, and that's going to dive into how it works. And I always like to joke when we're at a meeting and somebody's like, I just don't know how it works. I'm like, goodness gracious, I don't mean to offend, but I do want to point out we do have a chapter called How It Works that explains how this thing works. But I don't do that. That's a little thought that I have in my head. I don't say it out loud. Anywho, I'm cheeky enough as it is. Alrighty. So it says further on, clear-cut directions are given showing how we recovered. So what I want to point out is part of why we are doing a study like this is to understand, to extrapolate, which is to get the information of what are the clear-cut directions. I gotta, if we're hanging out with Brian, and I love that every week that Susan's like, where are you going? If we're like in a truck driving somewhere, we need clear-cut directions. Now, I do typically live with vibes, but if we don't want to get lost, we got to follow the directions. So we got to understand what are the directions. Actually, right now, there's a do not enter sign, which is a clear-cut direction. Don't turn around. Don't do it. Sorry. Be safe, everyone. Alrighty. But that idea of clear-cut directions, and I will say there are clear-cut directions in this book, but I miss them. So I needed to go through it with somebody who had gone through it. And that's part of why we're going line by line, word by word, breaking this thing down so that I can know what are the actions I need to take. And also, what I will say is there are clear-cut, black words, white page, clear-cut directions. And guess what? There's also a little bit of wiggle room. I'll describe what the directions look like, and your sponsor might give it to you slightly differently. And that's okay. I don't have to die on that hill. But if we're following the directions, we should be getting the same result. And that's how we know. Am I getting that result? So rather than just arguing about things that do not matter, I can ask myself, am I getting the results that are promised? So, and then it says how we have recovered. And I always want us to emphasize that word recovered. And if you hear that word and you're like, oh, that is just as offensive as some of the other words you were saying. And I watch my profanity. The words that I was saying was God, higher power, spirit of the universe. If you are here and you hear the word recovered and you're like, what do you mean recovered? I'm never going to be cured. And if Rob was here, we miss him. He's having a wonderful family dinner with his son. So I'm super excited about that for him. But you don't need his business, but you're getting it anyways. Just everyone message Rob and tell him you love him. Poor Rob. But he would be putting in the chat this definition of recovered. And we want to highlight and underline and emphasize the word recovered because that is promised to each and every one of us. And again, if you're here today and you're like, ew, recovered? What does that mean? What that means is that the obsession of the mind, the thought that I have when I am sober that tells me I can take a drink, that thought is removed and it is gone. And that happens as the result of the 12 steps. Now, I'm not going to bounce us around there because there's so many places in this book it describes the word recovered. And if every time it said recovered, I took us to the 10th step promises, you guys would be so sick of those promises. But those 10th step promises describe what it means to be in a recovered state, where the obsession is gone and we can live in a position of neutrality, where the thought to drink is gone from us. There are no more suddenlies. We are free. But as an alcoholic, I'm never going to be free from the allergy. I take a drink, it will always set off the allergy. Where I take a drink and I need more, I'm never going to be free from that. And even in the 10th step promises, it talks about a daily reprieve, contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. Those 10th step promises happen. That recovered state happens when I am at step 10, actively working step 10, following that up with 11 and 12 as a way of life. That's what it means to be recovered. So there will never be a time when I could ever safely drink again, but I'm still recovered. And there will never be a time when I could ever safely not be fully engaged with the daily actions of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because if I do, the thought to drink will come and I will drink again. But that's what it means to be recovered. And that is a promise for each and every one of us. So it says these are followed by 42 personal experiences, stories. And that's when we talk about like Alcoholics Anonymous and very specifically the book Alcoholics Anonymous. This book went out in the world to carry the message. And I might be an alcoholic alone in the world and not know a single other sober individual, but get a copy of this book and be able to diagnose myself, to be able to follow these directions, to recover and then to help others. But if you're like me and like most alcoholics, you've come to Alcoholics Anonymous thinking, but I'm different, which is like, it's so funny. We all think we're different, which is like so unifying. I'm different. There's never been an alcoholic wearing a bright red shirt at an ODAAT meeting. We got at least 2 others. You know what I mean? All the ways that I'm thinking I'm different. I'm not like you. And so the purpose of the stories is to help people know that, yes, they can recover too. And that's what we do. And that's the purpose of sharing our experience, strength, and hope, to let others know that they too can recover. And this is what we're meant to talk about in our stories, because this is what the personal stories talk about. It says each individual in the personal stories describes in his own language and from his own point of view, the way he established his relationship with God. And so you might be like, what? What they're talking about is each individual in the stories shared from their own point of view how they took the 12 steps that brought about the spiritual awakening and what their life is like now. That's what we're talking about. How they applied the steps, their experience with the steps, their experience with the spiritual awakening, and of course our experience with our alcoholism. But the message of hope contains all 3. My experience with my alcoholism, my experience with the steps, and my experience with the spiritual awakening. And it says, these give a fair cross-section of our membership and a clear-cut idea of what has actually happened in their lives. So there's a bit of authenticity and transparency. And what has happened, we're talking about that profound change from the inside out. That's what we're talking about. So it says, we hope no one will consider these self-revealing accounts in bad taste. So we're hoping, and then you look at somebody like me who's like, I don't mean to cause, I hope I don't mean to cause any offense, but I'll be, in my alcoholism, I'll behind the dumpster with my pinky up in my wet pants. Y'all know, we're hoping that doesn't offend you. But our hope is that many alcoholic men and women, and whenever we see men and women, just remember there weren't really women. There was like men in Alcoholics Anonymous at that time. So whenever we see men and women, that was a hopeful and inclusive statement. That was a statement that was trying to reach as many alcoholics as possible. So our hope is that many alcoholics who are desperately in need will see these pages. These pages, because these pages are what gives us Alcoholics Anonymous, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, as well as the diagnosis for alcoholism. And it says, we'll read these pages, and we believe that it is only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that they will be persuaded to say, yes, I am one of them too. I must have this thing. So I've got to be honest. And by the way, I will say the honesty, I'm sure we've all been in a meeting where somebody says something. This has happened to me. Maybe, hopefully this hasn't happened to you. But people have been like, I don't like your share page. I think you have too much enthusiasm. I think you're annoying. I think you should tone it down or blah, blah, blah. That happens to me. Not that often, but more than it should. And then, not that it doesn't matter, but then it's followed up with, well, I'm just being honest. It's an honest program. I'm just going to point out that's not what we're talking about when we call an honest program. It's not, honesty does not get, that honest program doesn't give me the freedom to be a dinky do to other people. No, but it is honest about what is my experience with my alcoholism, with the 12 steps and with the spiritual awakening. So I'm just going to throw that out there just in case somebody was like, yeah, I'm going to tell my wife or my boss what I think. I'm just being honest. Please don't. Please let us take a course of action. Let's write some inventory before we say those words. Otherwise, there will be an amends already. So, and what is the point of disclosing? So when I disclose with you what the allergy looked like in my life, what the obsession of the mind looks like in my life, what it looks like when I'm off the beam, when I'm not actually doing this thing, the reason I disclose that is so that you can say, yeah, that's me. I'm not alone. I'm not different. To cut through my little delusions, my little ones. You have big ones. Yours are real. Mine are petty. But my little delusions and my little, I'm different. Nobody has a red shirt on. It's just me. I'm the only one. So to cut through all of that, so I can say, that's me. I have alcoholism and I need this solution. Because when I see the problem for what it is, that leaves me in a place of hopelessness. And I've got to grab a hold of the hope. So let's pop over to the chapter more about alcoholism, and we're going to laser beam focus on that problem so that we're able to grab a hold of the hope. So more about alcoholism, and what we're really going to focus in on in this chapter is the obsession of the mind. We're going to talk a little about the allergy of the body, but the thrust of what we're trying to do in more about alcoholism is see clearly the obsession of the mind. And see clearly what it looks like in our life so we can see our own hopelessness. And so we're going to see some words, synonyms, but if I say it wrong, it's synonyms, words for the obsession of the mind. Words that are different words that mean the exact same thing, pointing to the obsession of the mind. And if you're new here and you're like, wait, what is the obsession of the mind? The obsession of the mind is a thought or series of thoughts that I have when I am sober that tell me I can drink again. This time will be different. Nobody's going to know. My problem is I was getting hammered with Jacqueline. We were causing a scene. Yeah. But listen, Pep and I are going to do it pinkies up. That's the obsession of the mind. And so that's what we want to see. And so let's dive in. It says, most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. Now, let's use this book as a mirror. Let's hold ourselves up to the light of this experience. Hey, anyone here a little unwilling to admit that you're a real alcoholic? Anyone here hoping you got like diet alcoholism? And as a result, I could do like sugar-free AA or like AA light. You know what I mean? Like that's what I was after. I have little baby alcoholism. And I just need a little AA, like, what is it called? Like a binky or a sucky. I just need my little AA soother. I don't have to do all of this, right? I was living in yeah buts. You know what I mean? I came to Alcoholics Anonymous with buckets of yeah buts, which is the unit in which yeah buts come in. They come in buckets. Yeah, but I'm different. Yeah, but I'm young. Yeah, but he drank more than me. Yeah, but if you went through what I went through. Yeah, but I'm anxious. Yeah, but I'm depressed. Yeah, but I had my yeah buts. Oh, and goodness gracious, I came with my andas. Ooh, I feel like andas should be on a serving tray, but they're also in buckets in my life because they'll spill everywhere. And, I'm an alcoholic anda, all these extra things that I got going in my life. So most of us. So if you're here today and you're like, oh, but I'm different, or, oh, but I have these other things, or I'm not as bad, or I'm way worse. Yeah, Eileen's got the mug, terminally unique. And by the way, the problem with being terminally unique is that I am unique in the way that I am not willing to accept the help, which leads me to a fatal condition. I'm not going to survive. So it goes on to say, no person likes to think, and this is important, he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. So in step 1, we focus on 2 symptoms. The 2 symptoms we focus on in step 1 are the symptoms that only alcoholics have, that make us different from non-alcoholics. And the symptoms are what happens in my body, and the symptoms are what happens in my mind. So when we talk about being bodily different, you can make a little note if you're writing in your book, because I hear that's what cool kids are doing. By the way, if anyone's, most of you are a little Anodyne to my like cool kids thing, but if you're new, everyone's a cool kid, even if you're not writing in your book. So when I say the cool kids, I do mean all of you. So no person likes to think he is bodily, so you can make a note, physical allergy. Now that physical allergy creates that phenomenon of craving. And here's what this looks like. I take a drink and, I take a drink. And then I get it's like a little switch. It's always nice to be home because I have the prop. A little switch that goes off in the back of my head and it tells me more. And the more that I drink, the louder that more gets. And I need that next, and I need that next, and I need that next. And the more that I drink, the stronger I need that next one. And what happens is I cannot control the amount that I take. And if you're still unsure about this, we have some ways to figure out whether or not we have the allergy. The first is if you routinely, now I know some of you are going to be full on liars about this, but if you routinely drank yourself into wet pants, some of you are like, I would never. You liar. But here's the thing. People who have the ability to control the amount they drink stop before their pants are wet. They are in the perpetually dry pants club. Never been there. Love to be there. That's not me. Another way to figure out, hey, do I have this allergy? Do you know what it's like to drink with other people? And at the end of the night, they're passing out, they're coupling up and making their different bad decisions. They're going home, they're getting an Uber, whatever. And you're playing this game. You let me know if you've ever played this game. The game is called Bottom Beer Roulette. And if you're like, what is this? What is this? I still don't quite, some of you figured this out. But Bottom Beer Roulette is where you go around and you finish off everyone else's bottom beers that they left, trying to avoid the one with the cigarette butts. Yes, you guys know. Now here's the thing. If you've played Bottom Beer Roulette, you got the allergy. Yeah, Lynn's got a strainer. And here's the thing, is if you finished off the one with the cigarette butts, there ain't no doubt about it, you got the allergy. And if you show up prepped to the party with a strainer so you can get the cigarette butts out, all I'm saying is like, girl, yeah, you got it on. Girl, you can write that inventory. You have this thing. No doubt about it. All right. And so then when we talk about being mentally different from our fellows, when we talk about being mentally different, you can make a little note that what we're talking about there is the obsession of the mind. And we often talk about things that are like alcoholic personality traits or whatever. But I want to be very clear. When we talk about being mentally different, or when we refer to anything that is I saw the cigarette emojis going up, that's top shelf. I caught it. But when we talk about being mentally different, or we talk about the mental obsession or anything that is of the mind, what we're specifically referencing is the thought that I have before I take the first drink. It is a sober thought that takes me to the first drink. This time it'll be different. Nobody will ever know. Got to get it out of my system. It's a case of the suddenlies. It's an erosion of I just need to get drunk, That's what we're talking about. Now, again, if you guys want to see, and we're going to talk about it, maybe not this week, not doing amazing for time, but I'm doing sufficient. I don't know if you guys will, if anyone has any complaints, send them to Rob. Rob will take them. So poor Rob, he's just going to get a lot of unsolicited text of like, love you, hope you're having a wonderful time. And also, these are my complaints about Paige. I'm just being honest. That's poor Rob's going to be inundated. But so what we're talking about is the thought that I have when I'm sober that takes me back to the first drink. And if we're not sure what that looks like, is there anyone here who has said, I'm not going to drink again? Has that ever uttered your lips, crossed your thought? And it doesn't matter when you said it, how you said it, because I will tell you that I think that phrase is never said more than when we find ourselves in the most spiritual prayer position, 3 a.m., puking our guts out in the toilet. Had no problem with prayer then, on our knees and everything, praying to the porcelain gods, dear God, make it stop. I will never drink again. And here's the thing. Is there anyone here who has said, I'm never going to drink again, who has also had food poisoning? And if you've had that experience where you had a bad tuna salad, you had a bad case of shellfish or something, and you said, I'm never going to have that again, what I want you to know is that had an effect. But I'll be honest, if you're hanging out with me, and I love you, and I'm so glad you're hanging out with me, it's so much fun, I will tell you, your desire to stay sober has not had any effect. Because otherwise you'd be doing something else on a Wednesday. You know what I mean? And that's how we know I have the obsession of the mind. Have I ever gone to AA before, treatment before, therapy before, promised people, gone in and out of the hospital, in and out of jail, in and out of the psych ward, or even just knew I don't want to do it and I didn't tell a soul, but I found myself doing it anyways. Even if I was swearing off the baby shower, I'm not going to get absolutely schmammered at the baby shower, and got schmammered at the baby shower anyways, or I'm not going to drink before court, or I'm not going to drink while I'm on probation, or I'm not going to drink while I'm pregnant or nursing. And that's the power of this illness, that there are times where we can't even stay sober through these things that we need to stay sober through. So does that sound familiar? So it goes on to say, therefore, we don't want to admit that we have these differences. Therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers, and I will just point out that only an alcoholic's going to make a career out of it. You know what I mean? That was not a part-time gig. I was even doing more than the 9 to 5. Oh, I was burning the midnight oil. I was trying to climb that corporate ladder of alcoholism. Found myself right to the bottom. That's where I found myself. So, drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts. To be in vain means that it does not work. So countless futile, hopeless, like non-successful attempts to prove that they could drink like other people. So we've proved again and again and again that we are unable to drink successfully. So we're beginning to see our problem is that we go back to it despite knowing that. It says the idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. Now, when we look at the word great, or the phrase great obsession, that is a synonym, a word that means the obsession of the mind. That's what we're talking about. And so the obsession of the mind is that we will control and enjoy his drinking. Now, let's have a look at this, because sometimes we talk about paradoxes in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'll be honest, I don't think we have as many paradoxes as it sounds like we do, because a lot of the things that seem paradoxical are actually experiential, which is it only makes sense if I do it. This is the alcoholic paradox. I want to control and enjoy my drinking. You know when you're enjoying it? Is there any modicum of control? Absolutely not. And you know that situation where you're trying to control it? Maybe you go out with a spouse or a partner to an event and they have been very, very clear. You can only have 2 or 3 drinks. And you only have 2 or 3 drinks, and it's just about holding on until you can get home and drink how you want. Another example of trying to control and enjoy our drinking is if you've ever snuck your drinks. Just going to throw it out there. If I have to sneak them, that means I don't want people finding out that, because I know it's a problem. They know it's a problem, right? So that is the obsession, this idea that I'm going to control it and I'm going to enjoy it. And when we talk about abnormal, that word abnormal sometimes carries a bit of a moral a layer, like a layer of like morality that I don't think it did in the 1930s. In like, if you were to be like, Paige, you're abnormal, well, I would respond, yeah, that's accurate. But other people would be like, I take great offense, how dare you? But when we talk about abnormal, there's not a judgment. When we talk about abnormal, it is 9 out of 10 people, the vast majority of human beings, percentage-wise, once they start to drink, they do not have the allergy. So our reaction to alcohol is abnormal, which is to say, it's something that happens to us that does not happen to most people. Similarly, our reaction to sobriety. Now, I want to be clear, what I'm talking about here specifically is the obsession of the mind. The thought that I have that takes me back again and again to that first drink is abnormal. If every time I had a tuna fish sandwich, I vomited, pissed my pants, and destroyed all my hopes and dreams, I'd turn you down on the tuna. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't be here for it, right? But the fact that I go back to it again and again and again, there's something abnormal. It's not about judgment. It's just about statistics. So it goes on to say, the persistence of this illusion. Now, that word illusion is also a synonym for the obsession of the mind, because I cannot see what is true. And what is true is once I start to drink, I cannot stop. I cannot control it every single time. And more often than not, I burn my life to the ground. That's what's true. But I can't see that. What I see is this time will be different. Nobody will ever know. So the persistence of this illusion is astonishing. And to be fair, it is our loved ones that are usually more astonished with our behavior. It's like, how could you do that again? And this is important. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. You see, I would describe myself as an up-to alcoholic. I'm going to let it get bad, but I'm not going to let it get that bad. right? Yeah, I might start losing some stuff, or there might be some consequences, but I'm not gonna get and whatever it is for you, DUI, I'm not gonna go to jail, I'm not gonna die, I'm not gonna boop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop. But here's the thing, if I have no ability to control the amount that I drink once I start, and I don't have the ability to stay sober when I want to, I do not have the ability to stop before I lose my mind or before I die. It is into the gates of insanity or death, even though somebody like me, I don't think so. And those gates don't swing both ways. And if you guys remember a couple weeks ago, because it takes me a while to get through things, a couple weeks ago we were talking about Roland Hazard. And Roland Hazard, when he was given the prognosis of hopelessness, and we're going to talk about our prognosis here in a second, his prognosis, he felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. That hopelessness is what I need to see in step one. Speaking of step one, we got a cheeky little step one up in here. And so it says, so you can make a little note when it says, we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. You can put a little star or a unicorn. I mean, draw whatever you want. There's a couple times I'm like, draw a capybara. Just make a little note and you can write step one. This is step one in the book. This is where it is and where it's found. So let's break down step one. So we had to fully concede to our innermost selves. Now the word concede is ultimately a word that means surrender. We needed to surrender to our innermost selves. Now I have a sponsee who talks about like concede is stronger than surrender. But in a historical way, hey, why don't we talk about surrender a whole lot in Alcoholics Anonymous. Why is that word not found in the first 164 pages? Because we won't find that word there. Isn't that interesting? We talk about surrender, but it's not there. Now, I'll tell you why. The reason why is that word was, I could leave you hanging and speculate. Now I won't do that. I'll just tell you. Yeah, I got a visceral reaction. They're like, don't do that. You tell us. I will. I promise. So the reason is, where are the actions of the 12 steps were adopted from the Oxford group. They weren't laid out in steps like ours are today, but the basic idea was, well, I'll say borrowed, just like how alcoholics borrow things. We take it and we don't give it back. And then we'll even help you look for it. But we borrowed it from the Oxford group. And the Oxford group they were big on surrender. Surrendering their lives to the will of a power greater than themselves. So that use of the word surrender would sort of tie them in with the Oxford group. And we needed to be our own separate entity, our own thing. So that's why we don't see the word surrender, despite it being implicit all over the book and spoken about quite a lot. So we learned that we had to fully concede, fully surrender to whom? Not to my sponsor, not to my probation officer or the parole officer or the spouse or the, psychologist, psychiatrist, treatment center, doctor, whoever. I need to be fully convinced to my innermost self. And why? Well, two reasons. One, they already know and they're already convinced. They don't need convincing. But the reason is I'm the one that needs convincing. If I don't see the predicament that I'm in, I'm not going to do this thing. I need to see the reality. So that is step one. And so what does that mean, fully conceding to my innermost self that I'm an alcoholic? So oftentimes we hear step one, I'm an alcoholic, I can never ever drink again. That's not quite step one. And for those of you who come to this study and are used to me, you're a little anodyne to my sort of description of what step one is. But if you're a little new to this thing, you might be like, wait, this goes a little contrary to some of the things I've heard. Just bear with me. That is a part of it, but that is not the whole message. So to fully concede to my innermost self that I'm an alcoholic, I need to concede the symptoms of alcoholism. So the first thing that I need to concede is that, do I have the allergy? Is my experience that more often than not, once I start to drink, it sets off that allergy and off I go, burning it to the ground? Is that my experience? I need to be convinced of that. And what that means is, that's true. There will never be a time when I can ever safely drink again. Because if I have the allergy, I have the allergy. Now, again, if you're here today and you're like, wait a minute, Paige, wait. I've got a yeah, but. I know you got it from your bucket. That's where you keep them. I got a yeah, but. Hold on. Back in 68, back in 82, back in 86, back in 94. Hey, in 98, in 04, 08, 06, 05, 2015, 2016, 2020, I had 3 drinks like a lady. Pinkies up. And my pants were dry and I had both my shoes. And I will point out, that was the exception, not the rule. We're remembering the exception. Now, if you were, and if you're still not convinced and you're like, yeah, but, hold on. Every single time you went drinking, did you want to have dry pants and both shoes? Probably. And then how often did you end up with dry pants and both shoes? Not that often, you know? And if you aren't a chronic pant sweater, good for you. What's that like? But you get what I'm saying when I use those, right? That I lose control. But here's the thing. If I have any experiences of my life of the allergy, I've got the allergy. And if you were to go to a non-alcoholic, somebody that you know for sure is not an alcoholic, and you say, could you please tell me a time where you went and you had 3 drinks and stopped and went home? Could you tell me a time you cut loose, God bless them, with 6 drinks and got home responsibly? Could you tell me a time that happened? And they would struggle to tell you a time that happened, because that was like every single time. Every time. And then you take it one further and you're like, could you tell me one of your like good old drinking stories? Oh, God bless. You know, their drinking stories, oh, they pale in comparison. You know, there's not a police car in sight. And actually, I remember I have family and they are not alcoholic. And I was hanging out with them and they were drinking this homemade peach gin. And they were drinking it together and they got to the bottom and there was these peaches that were at the very bottom of this gin and they were fighting about them. Now, bear with me. They weren't fighting over them how we'd be fighting over them. Mine. They were like, no, you have it. No, you have it. No, you have it. Oh, I am so intoxicated. I could not have it. You know what I mean? They're enunciating. Nobody's walking through a table. There's not a swagger or you know what I mean? It's like, no, you could do the nose and the, alphabet backwards. What do you mean you're so drunk you can't have it? That's their experience. And here's the thing, the allergy for many of us, not for all of us, but for many of us, it's like playing Russian roulette. When we were young, there was only one bullet in the chamber. But the longer we drank, the more bullets there were. And by the time we're hanging out with me, man, it's all bullets, And so that's the allergy of the body. I've worked with a sponsee before who was like, yeah, no, I think at 9 I was a moderate drinker, then turned into a bit of a hard drinker by 13 or 14, real alcoholic by 16. You know what I'm saying? That doesn't have to be your story, but I'm just like, we'll hold on to an experience we had at 9 years old. No, I drank like a responsible 9-year-old. Okay. That's not, flags are red. So what we're saying, the first thing I need to concede is that I have the allergy of the body, which is fair enough. When people say step 1 means that I can never drink again, I'm conceding that. But this is what really makes step 1, is that I need to fully concede to my innermost self that I have the obsession of the mind. And again, the obsession of the mind is the thought that I have when I'm sober that takes me back again and again and again to the first drink. And if the allergy of the body means that I can never ever drink again, what the obsession of the mind means is that I will drink again. If my illness is untreated, I will drink again. And that is step one. I have to stay sober. I need to stay sober. I want to stay sober, but there is a relapse that is coming. It is inevitable, which means to say it will happen, and it is imminent, which is to say it will happen always sooner than I think it will. That is step one. I'm going to drink again. And that's what I need to fully concede. And when I see that, it makes sense that I would come from that place of hopelessness and be willing to grab a hold of the hope. If I am going to drink again, that is inevitable. I don't want to drink. I have to stay sober. What can I do? What solution do we have? And so that's when we can offer, we got a spiritual awakening that happens as the result of the 12 steps, and that we can live in a recovered state. But that's what we're trying to see. And again, that sort of description is not something we always hear in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it can kind of shake it up, and you might be like, girl, are you trying to be contentious? And I assure you, I am not. I don't like conflict. I hate it. It's my least favorite. But the next line tells us the delusion. And delusion is another synonym for the obsession of the mind. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently maybe, has to be smashed. I was surprised how well I lined that up. I like to make little pictures and little designs and stuff. And so this is delusion smashers. That idea that I can do it my way. That idea that I've got to smash the delusion that there will ever be a time when I can safely drink again. I got to smash that. But just as important, if not more important, I've got to smash the delusion that I can stay sober on my own power, that I can do it on my own. We've got to smash that. And so it's not me being contentious. It is the reality of the illness that is alcoholism. And so I'm trying to gauge as to whether or not I have time to push it for one more paragraph. Oh, Peppa gave me the nod. I have Peppa permission. We're going. Alrighty. We alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. So when we talk about lack of control, we're talking about the allergy. So we're going back to talking about the allergy. And it says, we alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. This is important. We know that no real alcoholic ever recovers control. So if I've got this thing, there'll never be a time I can ever safely drink again if I have alcoholism. And here is again, the book meeting us where we're at as we kicked off this chapter. The book saying, hey, you probably don't want to admit you're an alcoholic. That's all of us. Meeting us where we're at. It happens here as well, where it's going to meet us when it's like, wait a minute. It says all of us felt at times that we were regaining control. We all had that experience where it's like, hey, that one time I had 3 drinks like a lady. And some of you are like, no, you didn't, because you've never done anything ladylike in your life. Fair, clocked me on that one. But so it says that we all had these moments where we felt like we were regaining control, but such intervals, usually brief, were inevitably, which means always followed by still less control. So we maybe went out on a little bit of a drinking and our drinking binge, and our drinking started, I'm just going to have, and we do 3 drinks, and the next day we do 3 drinks, and we have next day 3 drinks, and then we blow it up, and go on a bender, right? That's what it's saying, that we've had these periods where we're like, no, I was able to control it. And it always led, like, let's hold our experience up to that light as, didn't my sobriety always lead to a relapse? And didn't my drinking always lead to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization eventually? And it says, which led in time to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. And I always like my old friends. And those are often words that we don't really need to define, even if you don't quite intellectually know the words, the definition of the words pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. You know the experience. You know the experience. And to be pitiful is to be broken, without option, without solution. And incomprehensible is you're like, I don't know. I don't know why this is happening. And that demoralization is, I've got nothing. That hopelessness. And it goes on to say, we are convinced to a man. Now, to a man means without exception. I don't know why. To a man means without exception, but that's what that means. We are convinced without exception that alcoholics of our type, and what is our type? What is hopeless alcoholic? What is real alcoholic? That I have the allergy and I have the obsession. That's what it is. That's all it is. So alcoholics who have the allergy, who have the obsession, are in the grip of a progressive illness. Over any considerable period, we get worse, never better. And here's the thing. I will get worse whether I'm drinking or not. The illness progresses whether I'm drinking or not. And if you've seen people who've been sober something like 20, 30 years and gone back out, you know that to be true. And so if my illness is progressive, what does that mean? My recovery has to be progressive. I couldn't stay well on one drink. I cannot stay well on one spiritual experience. And that is really pushing it. I've given you like 30 seconds. So over to you, Peppa.